Hello, and this is the first of a series I'm doing on the political side of this channel. If you're into anime, the gaming content, this is different, but if you're into learning about revolutionary theory, then go ahead and stay tuned. This is a lecture. I'm doing a lecture today on Kwame Ture, also known as Stokely Carmichael, one of the greatest revolutionary figures that we've ever really had. He was a member of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. He worked with Martin Luther King. He was a follower of Malcolm X, a member of the Black Panther Party. He was he uh he was a very prominent figure, known for his great revolutionary ideology that would uplift the consciousness of the people he would speak to, or that would listen to him or read him. He was driven off by the FBI. It was he had no choice. They were threatening his mom, so he ended up fleeing to Africa, and he lived until the late '90s where he died of cancer. But today we will go over the politics of Kwame Ture. So everything's broken up by sections on subject. This is a culmination of years of research, of watching all his speeches that I could find, taking down notes, reading books. A lot went into putting this together. So we will dive right into this. As I said, it is section by section. I might do some commentary on some of these things. If you're new to this kind of thing, then buckle up, because you're gonna go down the rabbit hole, and this is gonna be a huge red pill for you. Anyhow, we'll start with an introductory quote. And again, this is all about revolution, just so you know. So, and these are all his words, by the way. So he said, If your people are oppressed, and you are not making a contribution to end the sufferings of your people, by your very act of inaction, you are against your people. There is no middle ground. On Martin Luther King Jr. Some years ago, around the time Martin Luther King's birthday had just become a holiday, I had the opportunity to speak at Spelman College. You know, those sisters were fired up. Martin Luther King's birthday had just come, and they were out there. They were out there. When I walked in it was wall-to-wall Africans, and they were excited. I asked them a question. How many of you love Martin Luther King? Put your hands up. Some of them put both hands up. Then I asked them a simple question. Keep your hands up if you have read one book by Dr. Martin Luther King. They all put their hands down. They don't even read about King. All they know about King is what they get off the television. And the television can only give you sound bites at best. What he means by sound bites is that if you depend on the TV or the schools even to teach you about Martin Luther King, you're only going to know a small minuscule of what he was about. You might as well know nothing, practically. Back to what he was saying. Even Martin Luther King himself was confused on this. Oh, okay, yeah. So that was the. All right, this is the one part I didn't label. But anyhow, even Martin Luther King himself was confused on this issue. When we attacked Israel, he said, any attack on Israel, no matter how you camouflage it, is anti-Semitic. Poor King was confused. He was very confused. To attack Israel has nothing to do with anti-Semitism. But we can understand King could not take the position we took. King's support came clearly from Zionists, who didn't say they were Zionists. But of course, any attack against Israel would have meant serious problems for King. But for us, we had nothing to worry about except the truth. So King himself was confused. And we will get back to Zionism when he talks about it. More on King. So everybody loves King because King was an honest man. Even if you disagree with his tactics, even if you disagree with his strategy, you must respect a man whose actions conform to his words. And whether you liked it or not, he said nonviolence. He was in the front lines. He said nonviolence. He was the first who went to jail. He said nonviolence. He was the first to be whooped. Therefore, you have to respect this man, even if you don't like him. I know many who said, well, I ain't going for that nonviolent stuff. I ain't into that. What you doing? Nothing. Shut up. You don't criticize somebody who's doing something when you're doing nothing. So I really enjoy this line, because what he's saying here is, because the issue is people are either on the Malcolm side or they're on the Martin Luther King side. When it's not about picking a side, it's about taking the best from the two and appreciating the two of them. because the Malcolm people are fighting the Martin Luther King people, and they're going back and forth. So, but the whole thing about non-violence, that's besides the point. It's what Kwame Ture is saying is that you still must respect King, because it's not about tactics; it's about the common oppressor. That's what he's trying to say here. Number three. He said, I know you love King, but you don't study King. Anyway, Martin Luther King had a feeling in the very beginning of his struggle that the federal government was on the side of the poor African masses, and furthermore, that our job was just to bring out the racism in the South. And once the federal government saw how racist the attitude was, they themselves would come and solve the problem. Malcolm used to say, the federal government is your biggest enemy. He said the federal government can send troops to Korea to fight for democracy and have racist pigs in Georgia lynch you and do nothing about it. Malcolm X was clear. Martin Luther King himself came to the same position that Malcolm X did. If you would look at the end of his campaign, the Poor People's Campaign was directed against the federal government. So Martin Luther King is paraded by white people as this soft and cuddly teddy bear that was peaceful and loving, but no. King became increasingly radicalized, especially towards the end of his life. And there's not much talk about what King was doing at the end, where he did go against the federal government. In fact, he was going to have millions of people sitting at the White House, and he knew that chaos could ensue. But he said to the government, either you do something or you face the wrath of the people. And that's part of the reason that led to him getting taken out. Number 4, King was an honest man, and that's why we still always love him, because what our people need more than anything else throughout the world is just honest men and women who truly represent their interests. King, generations will praise you. If they don't know you yet, they will come to you. King was a man who could come to criticize himself publicly without the slightest fear. Now this is important because people are very afraid to say, I don't know. People are very afraid to criticize themselves. And the fact that King could do this publicly and say that he was wrong, say that he was scared, it just shows you that King was just one of the most honest men that we ever had, the privilege of knowing about or learning from. The American capitalist system's job is to confuse us. So they give you I have a dream as his greatest speech. Anybody knowing King knows that I have a dream speech is one of his most mediocre speeches. Some people don't even know King, don't even know the speech. All they know is I have a dream. The American capitalist system can give you the most shallow understanding of history. And we'll get into the history later. Dr. King recognized he made an error, and when he came to criticize himself in his speech against the war in Vietnam, which is one of his best speeches, but they won't play that one for you. But if you really love your people, I recommend that you go and listen to that speech. Even if you don't like reading, it's on record. And if you listen to rap, ain't nobody can rap like King. I think the speech is called Why I'm Against the War in Vietnam. Dr. King was killed because he was an honest man. And this is why the FBI had to kill him. And we all know the FBI killed him. There's a court case where the family won. There's so much evidence to show it. If you would look at Dr. King, you will see that Dr. King had a lot of courage. He would criticize himself publicly. If my memory serves me correctly, I think it's in his speech, Why I Oppose the War in Vietnam. There it is. A speech which is much better than this trivial speech they put on television every day about I have a dream. If you wait for television to bring you King, you will never learn anything about King, as I was saying earlier. You need to get up and go to the library and read King for yourself. If you will listen to the speech, Why I Oppose the War in Vietnam, if my memory serves me correctly, I think he precisely says, there is a time when caution can lead to cowardice. Of course, here King was speaking about himself clearly, that his caution or taking a stand against the Vietnam War will lead to him to a position of being a coward, and he made it clear to all that he was not a coward. He was seriously cautious, and anytime he saw the truth, it would be his stance to speak out the truth. So when Dr. King said that there's a time when caution can lead to cowardice, is that what he means by that is You can be cautious, but if you're too cautious, it's because you're afraid, and you're too afraid. And King admits that he was afraid to criticize the war in Vietnam because he would get backlashed. And he did, but he did it anyways because he was an honest man. You will see the transformation because when King first started, he was for the federal government. He thought the federal government was his friend. As a matter of fact, as the chairperson of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, we had some slight conflict of this time and time again because he saw the federal government as a friend of the Africans. And I know they are pigs. Malcolm said that a long time ago. They're against us. There was no question here. But King himself came to see this. His last march was the Poor People's March, and this march was against the federal government. So J. Edgar Hoover was not stupid. J. Edgar Hoover was the director of the FBI at that time, one of the most evil men in history. He understood this movement here was going to lead to more, and who knows, maybe King would have come to say one day, I've made a mistake. Nonviolence is not a principle. We should arrive at our liberation by any means necessary. That would have been an explosive historic moment, but he was unfortunately taken out by a sniper team. So that concludes Kwame Ture's words on Martin Luther King. Now here's what he had to say about Malcolm X. Malcolm X was a conscious brother. Before, when he was an unconscious brother, he wasn't a member of any organization. He didn't care about no organization. But Malcolm X was ready to throw a brick at the police, just like any conscious brother. He was unconscious. When Malcolm became conscious, he became a member of the Nation of Islam. And when Malcolm left the Nation of Islam, Malcolm, knowing the importance of organizations, created two organizations, the Muslim Mosque Incorporated and the Organization of Afro-American Unity. Malcolm X knew the necessity of organization. When he says conscious, he means that Malcolm X, he learned revolutionary consciousness. When he says unconscious, it's somebody that does not know politics, does not know revolutionary theory, but they know something is wrong, but they don't know how to approach it. That's what it means by being conscious and being unconscious. And Malcolm X did make two organizations, Muslim Mosque Incorporated, which was based on religion, still fighting for the same thing, and then the Afro-American Unity, the Organization of Afro-American Unity, which was based on just politics strictly. Number 2. Malcolm says, whatever the enemy is for, you must be against. Whatever the enemy is against, you must be for. American imperialism knows only its own interests, and its interest is to confuse the people it oppressed to make them think that the oppressor and oppressed have the same interests. It is because of this that we are confused about Africa. If we understood that we should not have the same interests as American imperialism, then we will know automatically that Africa is our home. We say when you come to fight an enemy, you must think diametrically opposed to the enemy. Otherwise, else you will think just like the enemy and end up in the enemy's camp and not even know how you got there. So, I think there'll be more talk about this later in this video. Number 3, the third point. Malcolm X had great courage to criticize himself publicly. Malcolm said, I've attacked just about every leader out there. I've made a mistake. I'm sorry. I would like to work with all of them. Malcolm said it. I said I've always been in organizations, and I'll never be out of an organization thanks to Malcolm X. We said the police killed Malcolm X, and the New York police played a crucial role in killing Malcolm X. I'll never forget those pigs when Malcolm put the Nation of Islam out on 135th Street, and the police ran and ducked behind benches, and all of Harlem cheered and laughed. The police would never forgive Malcolm X for that. The police killed Malcolm. Malcolm said it himself. When your phone is tapped, the Nation of Islam cannot tap your phone. Only the police can do that. When you get followed to Cairo, Egypt, and you get poisoned there, the Nation of Islam cannot do that. And yes, a lot of people do not know that. Malcolm X did get poisoned when he went to Africa. They had to pump his stomach. It's a not so well-known fact. Only the CIA can do that. When you get blocked from going to France, the Nation of Islam cannot do that. Only the pigs of the CIA are capable of doing that. I've been blocked from France too. It's the CIA that killed Malcolm, and they killed Malcolm when he was between organizations. Malcolm left the nation and was in the middle of building two organizations. Malcolm was a giant. Malcolm clarified the problem carefully. He said the Nation of Islam, there are two segments. religion and politics based on nationalism. Let's separate them. He took Islam to Orthodox Islam. He took nationalism to Pan-Africanism. And while Malcolm X was in the middle of building these two organizations, the police said, if we don't kill him now, we're finished. And they got him. When I saw that, I said, thank you, Malcolm X. I will never be without an organization in my life. So what he's saying is that Malcolm, what I was saying earlier, the Muslim Mosque Incorporation became the religious segment of the organizations. And the Organization of Afro-American Unity became the politics side of the segment of the organizations. And he separated them. Because if they, he realized that he would instead of merging it together, he think it would cause some difficulty. So if you spread them, he can just have each one to their own preference. That concludes the section of Malcolm X. So here are some things he said about Black Power. In an interview, he was asked, what does Black Power mean? Kwame Ture, or formerly Stokely Carmichael, says, it means black people coming together and using their energies and making a power base to do what they have to do in order to ensure their liberation. If you really go into it deeply, it means that black people must be in control of their lives, must be in control of their politics, the economics, and the social aspects that determine their lives. Interviewer: Stokely, when you say by any means necessary, exactly what do you mean? And that's a Malcolm X quote, by the way. So Kwame Ture: by any means necessary means whichever tactic is applicable to bring about the best and most effective results to use. If a nonviolent demonstration can bring it, use it. If a violent demonstration can bring it, use it by any means necessary. Second point, Black Power means that we see ourselves as part of the third world, that we see our struggle as closely related to the liberation struggle around the world. Our people are a colony in the United States. You are colonies outside the United States. It is more than a figure of speech to say that the black communities in America are victims of white imperialism and colonial exploitation. Third point, when I say Black Power, I know exactly what I'm talking about, but the white man runs up to me and says, Black Power, that means violence, doesn't it? I refuse to react to that. I know what I'm talking about. If the white man doesn't know what I'm talking about, that's his problem, because black people understand me, and that is who I'm talking to anyways. So what I want to add to this is that you cannot convince everybody all the time. There will always be people who will disagree with you. No matter how right you are, they're never going to agree with you. And some just won't do it on purpose. So don't waste your time trying to convince everybody, because it is impossible to do so. On Black Power and the false ideas of equating success by putting a black person in office. Stokely says, or Kwame Ture says, Black Power, of course, has not been arrived at. We don't have Black Power yet. We have some ways to go before we get to arrive at Black Power. Some people get confused and think that individual African electoral politicians equals Black Power. I don't know how they come up with that conclusion. You can have an African mayor in New York, and the conditions of the African masses not only do not change, but in fact can become worse. When I go over Amos Wilson, we'll go more into detail on that. And in case you haven't figured it out yet, I'm the one that created the Disciples of Malcolm a long time ago on Tumblr. We're talking 2007 maybe even earlier, maybe later, around that time. So now I'm doing a combination of everything I had ever done in that blog and splitting it through videos. So you can expect people I talked about there to get their own videos. And I chose Kwame Ture as the first one. On history. The enemy keeps us ignorant, not haphazardly, but by calculated plans. Go and pick up any textbook that you had as a child. Go now and pick up the textbooks that your children have. The only time Africa is mentioned is that she gave slaves to America, and that the slaves who came from Africa to America should be very happy because the price of slavery and the oppression of America is better than the barbaric life which we lived in Africa. Thank you very much, America. You will read in all your textbooks about all the great things the Germans did, the contributions of the French to world humanity, the contributions of the British to world humanity, the contributions of the Italians to world humanity. But Africa, no contributions at all. They say in the very beginning, the struggle here begins with a fight against ignorance. Not only does the enemy make you ignorant, but then he makes you want to love ignorance and hate knowledge. That's a very true statement. I would elaborate more, but when I do a video on Amos Wilson, he'll get more into detail about what that means. But On this level, it explains itself. There's a reason why people like to do the things that destroy them and hate to do the things that help them grow and think revolutionary. There's a reason why people are designed that way. Second point, because the capitalist system has cut off our history, they think that we have no history. They really think that our history began in slavery. If you would look at all the textbooks in this country, even on the college level history textbooks, there is nothing said about Africa in these textbooks at all. I mean, Africa is just left out, like it doesn't exist at all. As most Africans who do not take time as a conscious people to come to understand their history, in fact, begin their history when the white man came and discovered us as slaves. Certainly, if the indigenous people of this country think that their history began with Columbus, they will be in serious trouble. They, who probably know their history, know that the indigenous people of this country raised civilizations, the heights of which European powers have not yet arrived at. Consequently, these people have this to hold on to. And they know as long as they hold on to it and fight, they will come back to the grand there that was once theirs. No people can begin their history in slavery. No people. God was never created anybody in slavery. All people are first created free, then they are enslaved. So any African beginning their history in the United States of America is a stupid African. This is his words, beginning their history in slavery. And if you begin your history in slavery, the best you can hope to be is a good slave. Indeed, if you begin your origin in slavery, where is the inspiration to fight? People who are enslaved must know at one time they were free. It is only when they know at one time they were free that they will be motivated by the responsibility which history imposes on them to struggle to be free again. Any African wanting to know about their history and using their history as a weapon to fight must begin their history in Africa. There is no other place. It was only in Africa that we were free. Thus, it is in Africa where we must begin our history. Once we've seen Africa, how we were free, then we will come to see who imposed slavery upon us. Who will come to know directly who is the enemy. We will come to know directly who is the enemy, what must be done to return to a stage of freedom again. Thus, in the struggle for liberation, Africa is indispensable to us as our historical weapon. Next session, on identifying the enemy. It's going to be a long video. I might lose my voice. So anyways, on identifying the enemy. Anytime that you make an analysis of an oppressed people in any aspect of their lives and you leave out the enemy, you will never come to a correct analysis. On the contrary, you will blame the oppressed for all of their problems. Everything I'm telling you tonight is more relevant today than it ever was before. I can tell you that. Back to Ture. Even if one were to talk about the drugs in our community, if you just talk about the drugs and not talk about the enemy, you make no analysis at all. If you haven't brought in the question of who brings the drugs in, why the drugs are brought in, for what purpose they are brought in, you will never understand the problem at all. When we speak of the condition of the African masses, we begin with the enemy of the African masses, especially the racist capitalist system in the United States of America. Second point. You know what they say? Drugs destroyed the Panthers. Drugs. The police destroyed the Panthers. Any analysis you make of an oppressed people in any area of their life, when you leave out the enemy, you will never get a good analysis and you will end up blaming the people. This is what your generation before you did not do. As a matter of fact, they're trying to make believe they had no enemies, and oppressed people must have an enemy. On Fred Hampton and police involvement in destroying communities. One of the reasons that Fred Hampton had to be assassinated was because he was bringing the Black Stone Ranger gang in Chicago, along with the Disciples, another gang in Chicago, which were rival groups, or gangs, together against the police. Their energies are not correctly channeled. They're channeled by the police. It's the police who spawn gangs in America. It's the police who bring drugs into the community. And it's the police who control the drugs in the community. It's the police who organize Africans to sell drugs in the community, making it look like they're not involved in it. On a side note, look up Gary Webb. Journalist Gary Webb, The Dark Alliance, he breaks it down there. Another man who was mysteriously killed because he proved with detailed documentation how the U.S. was bringing in the drugs and selling it to the poor communities or bringing it into them to corrupt them. So back to Ture. We did a video with the leadership of the Crips and the Bloods when they tried to come together 2 years ago before the rebellion. I think he's talking about the Rodney King when LA went on fire in the early 90s. Ture says, we told them the only way they will find unity is coming together to protect our community against racist police. I even told them then, the very guns with which the police give to you, police would get these guns. You understand? As a young man in SNCC, I was carrying a gun since 1962. So these gangs must be organized against the police because the police are the frontliners of the organized gangs in the country. What they want to do is to make the entire African community insecure among each other. When they saw the feeling of solidarity that was developing in the 60s, you understand, they said, we've got to stop this quick. We've got to bring insecurity inside here. So when they see each other, they won't say, hey, brother. They'll say, are you going to kill me? That's all. But it ain't going nowhere. It's just going to make us stronger for the second round on them because victory is ours no matter which way they come. That's very true today, though, that people are so scared of one another, whereas before there was much more brotherhood. To an extent. On Zionism. Unfortunately, they don't know what Zionism is. Zionism is a political philosophy which has brought about the so-called state of Israel. This political philosophy has nothing to do with religion. On the contrary, it seeks to confuse others and let them think that Zionism and Judaism is one and the same. I am a conscious African. I know properly my history. I know that Africa gave Judaism to the world. I know that the first Jews in the world were African. Not only do I know this, but I inform everyone who has doubts about it to read a book by Sigmund Freud entitled Moses and Monotheism as a Beginning. Consequently, I know that Judaism and Zionism are not the same thing. Zionism had its first organization expressions in 1897 in Switzerland, in Europe. Here was a man by the name of Theodor Herzl. He was the founder of Zionism. He said that he was going to find the state that God promised the Jews. Listen to this very carefully. This man Herzl was an atheist. He believed there was no God. He said God did not exist. How is a man that believes that God does not exist is going to find the state that God promised his chosen people? I tell you, this man is Satan in disguise. Zionism is a satanic movement. It is the devil. It is imperialism. It is racist. It has gone and taken the land of the Palestinian people, and through terrorism has driven them out. And through terrorism, it maintains its power. In the United States of America, with over 6 million homeless, sends to Israel billions and billions and billions of dollars everywhere to bomb Palestinian people, while homeless people here are unemployed. Zionism is going to raise this war and make the people of America become clear to what it is and become anti-Zionist and stop the aid to Israel and use the money to take care of the homeless in this country. On laws, I maintain that every civil rights bill in this country was passed for white people, not for black people. For example, I am black. I know that. I also know that while I am black, I am a human being. Therefore, I have the right to go to any public place. White people don't know that. Every time I try to go into a public place, they stop me. So some boys have to write a bill to tell that white man he is a human being. Don't stop him. That bill was for the white man, not for me. I knew I could vote all the time, and it wasn't a privilege but my right. Every time I tried, I was shot, killed, or jailed, beaten, or economically deprived. So somebody had to write a bill to tell white people, when a black man comes to vote, don't bother him. That bill was for white people. I know I can live any place I want to live. It is white people across this country who are incapable of allowing me to live where I want. You need a civil rights bill, not me. On America being more ripe for revolution today. People come to think that the struggle in America is not like it was in the 60s. Why? America is more ripe for revolution today than it was in the 60s. The people are more politically conscious. The conditions are worse. When you have a falling conditions and rising consciousness, you've got to have an explosion. Either it will be instinct, which will be a revolt, or either be reason and organized, which will be a revolution. but you can be sure you're going to have an explosion. We say the people's conscience are rising more and more. Even movements that we never thought about in the 60s are spreading everywhere. America is more ripe for revolution today than ever before. On the media, the capitalist system has but one job through its media: to make the Africans irresponsible, make them frivolous, make them hate themselves, make them have low esteem of themselves. Just in one word, keep them demobilized and ineffective, and tools for us when we need to exploit them, and turn them against their own people. This is their plan. We have to counteract this, and the television does it 24 hours a day, non-stop. Second point. The capitalist press, of course, is an arm of the capitalist system, and it must preserve the system. Therefore, it needs reformists, and reformists need the capitalist press. But I'm not a reformist, I'm a revolutionary. When I first entered a serious struggle in Mississippi, we couldn't use the press. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee could not use the press. Dr. King's organizations, they used the press because they were involved in mobilization. We were involved in a serious organization. If the pressmen knew who we were, we would be killed, assassinated by the terrorist groups. So the press was not an arm for us. I understand that the press is supposed to destroy any program that is trying to help bring our people together, other than reform program, which makes America look nice, keeps our people inside of her. Politically speaking, so we don't expect anything from the press, and when we come in contact with it, we fight it to use it. And of course, when it comes in contact with us, it tries its best to destroy us. So we understand, since we're not reformist, we're in total struggle with the American capitalist press. On organization. I am a disciplined organizer. All my life, I've been in organization, so I have organizational discipline, something the overwhelming majority of the masses of my people lack. They simply lack organizational discipline because they have never belonged to any organization. Organizational discipline is necessary. Its first necessity is to inform the individual that there is something more important than he or she, the organization and the principle in which it stands. This is necessary in a country like America, where all aspects of individuality is blown completely out of proportion, where an African will even tell you, work for my people. What do they do for me? Do they pay my bills? I only care for me and me alone. I don't need them. America is a backward country. Other than make you stupid, it makes you arrogant in your stupidity. All of us sitting here knows that an individual being isolated from the human species is totally incapable of making any contribution to life. The individual is dependent upon the masses of the people for everything. It's only when the people rise that you can rise. Second point. There's no such thing as an inferior people. They are oppressed people. And they are not oppressed by superior people. They are oppressed by people who are better organized than they are. The reason the Ku Klux Klan terrorizes us is because they are organized. They have meetings every week, and their members go to the meetings. They discuss racist ideology. They internalize it, and then they mobilize it. They make uniforms for that. Not many of us can say we go to meetings every week for the people. Third point. Some people think traitors are those who do something against the movement. You can betray the movement by not doing something for the movement. Hitler said, "Tell a lie 1,000,000 times, and the people will come to think of it. It's the truth." Revolutionaries say, "Tell the truth a couple of times, you will smash 1,000,000 lies." And that's exactly what the Million and More March did. That was a march that happened in the 90s. It was called the Million Man March. If you would look at the list of the capitalist media, you would think all we're concerned about is drug addicts shooting each other, crime, raping each other, ripping off each other. October 16th, one day, put all those lies in the garbage can forever. What have we done? We must heighten our organizations. Kwame Nkrumah said, unity presupposes organization. Many brothers and sisters think they are in unity with the people, but they don't belong to any organization at all the time. Unity presupposes organization. If you are not in an organization, you are not united with your brothers and sisters. History will not be denied. You can either be part of the historical process, come to take the serious task of organizing your people on a day-to-day basis, or you can come every Wednesday night, clap, feel good, jump up, say you were there, and go back and wait until next Tuesday. Our people are looking for direction and conscious must provide, and the conscious must provide that direction. The people are looking for unity. Let's give them unity. The people are looking for power. Let's give them organization. The masses want unity. Let's move from mass mobilization to mass organization. And later on, we'll go through the difference between mobilization and organization. On nationalism and the laws of dialectics. According to Marxism, Leninism, they see nationalism as negative. Stokely Ture, the great son of Africa, correctly pointed out that when you go from a nation to a state, as was in the case of Europe, nationalism is dominantly negative. But when you go from a state to a nation, as in the case of Africa, Asia, the Caribbean, South, and Central America, the colonized world, nationalism is a plus. We must understand the laws of dialectics. The first thing that Karl Marx teaches us about the law of dialectics is that everything is positive and negative at the same time, and in certain conditions, the negative can be dominant or the positive can be dominant. But something is never stagnant or all negative. Anytime someone tells you that nationalism is always negative, is dominantly negative all the time, they know nothing of dialectics. You will see for yourself all the struggles since the Second Imperialist War that they call World War II, which have battled imperialism, have all fought under nationalism, liberation struggle, all of them. Okay. Might want to lower my break. Okay. On organization and collective thought. We have unity of action. We lack unity of thought. Look at Los Angeles. Here you have clear unity of action. If I went to Los Angeles the day before Rodney King was charged, and I said, look, here, brothers and sisters, they're going to let these pigs get away free. We got to organize. We need to get some guns. We need to get some Molotov cocktails. Oh, he's just talking. But the minute at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when the decision went down, they didn't even listen to Malcolm, who said, after dark for even Steven. They went into the streets at 3 o'clock, and entire people who were fighting each other, cutting each other, disgusted with each other, came together in a unified force and took on the second largest city and the greatest imperialistic power in the world, and made them bring in the army to suppress them. We have unity of action. What we lack is unity of thought. Unity of action without guidance of unity of thought leads one into a reactionary position. Our people have unity of action, but this unity of action is usually triggered by an enemy action. For example, it's only when they have an incident in Howard Beach that everyone jump up like if Howard Beach all of a sudden changed. It's the same thing. And after they jump up and make a little noise, after a while they just sit right back down and say, oh Lord, please don't let them shoot nobody else while I'm alive so I don't have to get out there and make no protest. Please wait until I die. Rodney King gets beat up. What's new about it? I've been dealing with the Los Angeles pigs since I was in the Black Panther Party in the 1960s. And I know the pigs in Los Angeles. They are the most vicious that you can find any place in the country. They have in Los Angeles what they call a chokehold. The police puts it on you. You go look and see how many have been killed by the chokehold. It's your history. You're supposed to know it. The police bring the people back into being intimidated. They must do it. But this unity of action, which we have, can only come to stop the police at certain times for certain periods because it's spontaneous. People will never win a war through spontaneous action. You can only win a war through planned action. You give me 100 organized brothers and sisters, and let us face 10,000 disorganized with the same weapons. As Africa is my mother, we'll whoop them every time, hands down. Kwame Ture said, it is organization that decides everything, and the fact that we're disorganized proves it because we decide absolutely nothing. In order to have unity of thought, we must have collective thinking. One of the biggest problems with our movement is that we got so many individual stars and superstars. They are not disciplined to any organization. Organization disciplines you, and we are an undisciplined people. If you are just a member of the NAACP, it's a nice spring afternoon. You want to go out and lollygag, but the NAACP has a meeting. If you are disciplined, you will go to the meeting. How many of us can actually say that we go on a daily basis, on a weekly basis? Go to meetings for organizations and help to push these organizations forward through collective thinking. It's not done. So he mentioned in this quote, We got so many individual stars and superstars. These are people that know a lot, have so much theory, know it better than all of us, any of us do, but they'll do nothing. They just sit there and complain on the internet. They don't do anything. They have use. They can be useful if they did something, if they got involved if they organized, but they don't. So, and again, I'm gonna touch upon this with other people like Amos Wilson and Fred Hampton. But if you know all that theory and you don't do anything about it, your theory does not matter at all. So back to Ture. In most cases, most organizations don't even have political education programs built into the organization. As a member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, we had none. As a member of the Black Panther Party, we had none. Absolutely none. As a matter of fact, when I tried to bring it, oh, you're just a bourgeois college student. That's right. And an honor student at that. That's right. Not only that, I took philosophy, and dig this. Everything I get, I give back to my people. Does it make sense to you that you're a leader of a movement? You have 1,000 people who are following, and you are the only one who can see better than all these 1,000? That's stupidity. One woman may be more intelligent than one man. That's a fact. But no one man can have more experiences than two people, and it's experience that brings knowledge. Sit down and read a book with a stupid man. Let him read the same book. Come back and discuss it. He will show you stupid things to show you how stupid you were because you didn't see them. These are facts. As a people, we have no collective reading, no collective study, no collective thinking. This is our greatest error as a people. This is our greatest shortcoming as a people. This is why we can't even discuss who we are, because somebody thinks they Black American, and that's what they think. And what I think is what I think. Like you think you can think. Half the time, they aren't thinking. They're reacting to stimuli and think they're thinking. Unless we do collective reading and collective discussion, we cannot come to a unified thought. Of course, the enemy will confuse you. Capitalist system will tell you. You can think whatever you want to think. That's it. Man told me the other day. I said, "You African?" He said, "I don't think that." I said, "You think you're thinking?" He said, "I don't care what you say. I ain't no African, and that's what I think. And what I think is right." I said, "Okay, please, think that 2 + 2 = 5. Think it." No man, no woman is born with the truth inside of them. Not one. All of us come to acquire the truth by searching for it. First of all, we must even have a desire to know the truth. Acquisition of knowledge is directly related to the desire of knowledge. If you do not desire knowledge, you will never acquire knowledge. Once you understand that, your people are oppressed because they lack knowledge. If you love your people, you seek knowledge. If you love your people, you seek knowledge. And we understand this knowledge cannot be individual knowledge. It must be collective knowledge. Unity of thought must come. Again, we have people that know so much, could do so much. They understand things so clearly, but they don't do anything about the situation. So, they have people that follow them, maybe even thousands. But this one person has it figured out. But they can't do more than like a Tumblr image or a Facebook picture or an Instagram story. You gotta go way beyond that. We are concluding, but we say what we always say. We will never tire of saying it because it's the truth. If you love your people, join in an organization fighting for your people. Where is the problem? Alright, we're on line 202. Quick breather. So we're on guns, correcting mistakes, and America corrupting the minds of the youth. So Ture said, "We had more guns in the Black Panther Party chapter in New York alone than all the gangs in New York have today. I'm speaking to you facts, and yet nobody was getting shot in the African community by these guns. It is not guns that kill people, it is people that kill people, and they can kill you with poison. The problem is capitalism. The problem is a value that says you can get rich by any means necessary. These guns that these youths have must be used to protect the community, but let them show you exactly how these guns came. You remember the 50s? If you stepped on our brother's alligator shoe, he'd cut you from ear to ear. The enemy was sure that in the 1950s, he had us. I mean, if you saw us in the 1950s, when Brother Malcolm was speaking out there, you laugh. Africans used to come by and laugh at them. Oh, you're talking nonsense. Nobody paid attention. The enemy was sure he had them. But it was the same generation in the 50s that jumped up on him in the 60s. The Chinese say, if you make a mistake and you know it's a mistake and you don't correct the mistake, you've made your second mistake. The enemy is not like us. They are scientific. When they make a mistake, they correct it. We are the only ones who make mistakes and continue making them. We are revolutionaries. Since mistakes are fatal, we are forced to correct them. We seek quickly to detect them. The enemy was surprised. You mean that these Africans who were sleeping in dope heads and cutting each other in the 50s jumped up in the 60s, and these Africans who were afraid of the police jumped up and started shooting the police? We must put a stop to this. We say you can make no analysis of the people if you leave out the enemy. The enemy said we must reduce these people to such a state that there will be so much internal chaos inside the community that once again they will beg the policemen to come back in. It's very simple. There's nothing complicated about the plan at all. The enemy decided to pump in drugs, pump in guns, cut down on revolutionary talk. Let the culture talk about shaking their butts and nothing else. But we who struggle have a responsibility. In fight of heightened oppression of the enemy, we must heighten our resistance. I remember the other day, our brother came and said, "Oh, hey, brother, Kwame Ture, remember me? I was out there with you in the 60s. I was out there. So what you doing now?" "Oh, I ain't doing nothing." "You should be shot." I speak the truth. I know how desperately we need anyone who has any experience of struggle out here today. We need them more than we did in the 60s. And the beautiful thing about today is we got a whole lot of them with a whole lot of experience. On guns and police intimidation. You must understand this point very carefully. Violence has 2 points: reactionary violence and revolutionary violence. Everyone knows that the Africans in this country are oppressed through violence. When the police shoots down a brother, when the police shoots a 68-year-old woman, when the police shoots a 7-year-old boy anywhere in this country, it is for one reason alone: to intimidate the population, to keep them in line. This is violence. America is a racist capitalist country. Everybody knows that. I cannot, as an African in good conscience, advocate to my people that any one of them put down any gun in a racist capitalist state. On black people calling themselves Americans. Even if we call ourselves Americans, they don't treat us like Americans. They don't treat us like Americans. We have built this country and they shoot us down in the streets like dogs. And somebody's still holding on to them about, we Americans. There is nothing in America for us except exploitation. There is nothing in America for us except exploitation and oppression. On only the people advances themselves. Ture says, it is only the people that advances us. We say it every time. Every individual advancement we made by every African in this country is a result of the blood of the masses of the people. We repeat this statement all the time. It's true. There's nothing that we have achieved in this country without shedding blood. Absolutely nothing. To sit in a filthy 5 and 10 cent store in Selma, Alabama, you've got to shed your blood. To ride on a bus where you want to ride, even though you pay the same money as everybody else in Montgomery, Alabama, you've got to shed your blood. To live in a neighborhood where you want to live in New York City, even if you got the money, you've got to shed your blood. To get the vote, just like any foreigner gets it when they get here, you've got to shed your blood. To get your children into city college, into schools where you pay taxes, you've got to shed your blood. No African sitting here can show me one advancement that an individual African made that was not the result of the blood of the masses of the people. And he went on to say that those that are selfish and use these positions for themselves and don't give it back to the people, don't pay their historical debt, that they betray the blood of the people. On culture, Ture says, when you come to fight against an enemy, you must think differently from the enemy. And the only way you can think differently from the enemy is when you're rooted in your culture. When you are proud of your culture, and when you properly understand that the struggle here is really a cultural struggle, because your final analysis, all struggles are struggles of ideas, and all ideas come from the given culture in which they find themselves. We cannot have an organization unless we have an ideology, and our organization have them. Your ideology must come from your culture. It's only when your ideology comes from your culture that you begin to think different from the enemy. If you're thinking the same way the enemy is thinking, the enemy's solutions become your solutions. Thus, you end up saying, yeah, America's a great country, or it's a little bit racist, but after all. But if you think from your people's struggle, and you know that your people are the victims of racism, have been, always will be, you'll say, as long as America remains racist, I got to destroy it. Second point. Thus, the enemy uses our culture against us. He got some rap artists who have no understanding of life. They judge success by the people's culture, by how they can rip it off and sell it to the white man, rather than how much they can use it to advance the people on the course of liberation. And then he pumped up all the airwaves. They saturate you with poison. All over the mass media, they get these little rap artists to disrespect us, disrespect everybody. The enemy is working in vain. Nothing can stop us. These rap artists are only strawmen. The fight is not with them. The fight is with capitalism. They are only collaborators in the system. On identity. We want to bring to you some updates on the question of identity. It's crucial for a people whose culture has been destroyed. If one doesn't know who one is, one really cannot know what one's interests are or where one is going. Indeed, the first job of the oppressor is to wipe out the culture of the oppressed and have the oppressed believe that they have the same culture as the oppressor. His job is to have you think you have the same history as the oppressor. Once you think you have the same history, once you think you have the same culture, you would think that the enemies of your oppressor happen to be your enemies. Once you know your history, once you know your culture, you will know that the enemies of your enemy must be aided to bring down your enemy. This has a lot to do with the question of identity. Anytime you make an analysis of an oppressed people in any aspect of their lives, and you leave out the enemy, you will never come to a correct analysis. On the contrary, you will blame the oppressed for all their problems. Even if one were to talk about the drugs in our community, if you just talk about the drugs and not talk about the enemy, you make no analysis at all. If you haven't brought in the question of who brings the drugs in, why the drugs are brought, and for what purpose they are brought, you will never understand the problem at all. When we speak of the conditions of the African masses, we begin with the enemy of the African masses, especially the racist, capitalist system in the United States of America. Second point. Power begins on the level of conception, not on the level of implementation. Examples are everywhere. If you are a math student and you enter a math class and you can see, having proper conception, that Africa gave math to the world, therefore I'm an African, I can dominate this mathematics. I bet if you go into class with this conception, you'll dominate mathematics. But if you come with the conception given to you by the enemy, math is hard for us Africans, all we can do is play basketball and music. This math just ain't no good for me. The math will whoop you. The math will whoop you. Power begins at the level of conception, not on the level of implementation. That's why it's important for us to think as a people, not to think like the enemy wants us to think, or even trains us to think. Third point. Once you have a proper identity, one of your biggest problems is solved. People must have a clear understanding of their national interests. The job of American imperialism is to let us think that our national interest is within the confines of American imperialism. That's why Black American, African American, anything, but make sure they hold on to America. When the conscious comes to understand that there are Africans born in Africa, Africans living in America, their whole outlook changes completely. America no longer becomes their world. Of course, this is a difficult task because America convinced everyone that she is the world. The first conscious act in organizing our people is to let them know who they are. If you think you're an American, you will fight to protect the interests of capitalist America. If you know you ain't no American, you'll fight to destroy every aspect of American capitalism. On nonviolence. Dr. King's policy was that nonviolence would achieve the gains for black people in the United States. His major assumption was that if you are nonviolent, if you suffer, your opponent will see your suffering and will be moved to change his heart. That's very good. He only made one fallacious assumption. In order for your nonviolence to work, your opponent must have a conscience. The United States has none. It has none. On the FBI and CIA. The FBI and the CIA must be smashed if you want revolution. In any state, it is the police force that keeps the status quo in check. Undermining the police force of any state makes the alternative easier for revolution. Thus, attacking the FBI and the CIA is a proper revolutionary strategy. Today, the people have even more disrespect for the FBI and the CIA than ever before, and will become worse and worse because of the simple truth. When they were up there, like kings that did whatever they wanted to do, nobody looked at them. So they didn't cover up their dirt. They didn't know how to cover up their dirt. Now that people are looking at them, they're going to fumble and trip up over themselves because they never had anyone looking at them. They were above everyone else. But now, today, the people are looking at them, looking at their tricks. They can hardly move. We're going to tie them up until we tie them up completely and make them a force of neutrality in the struggle to overthrow capitalism. Second point. We know the FBI and the CIA are the pigs that write confusion in our community. I've worked with all sorts of statistics and research from our party against the FBI and the CIA. Let me give you an example. When the Soviet Union was betrayed by this scum, Gorbachev, Bush made the great announcement. The evil empire has fallen. We have a lot of CIA agents who've been there. Now we're going to take them and put them in the ghettos. He said it. We have the article. He even said most of them will be sent to the ghetto in Los Angeles. If you will look at Los Angeles, these pigs created some havoc there, pumping drugs and guns into the hands and developing gangs like the Crips and the Bloods. But when the rebellion came, it was the same Crips and the same Bloods who received guns from the police to shoot their people who shot the police, the same ones. The CIA, I laugh at them. I remember when the news was made, I was talking to a sister. She said, "Oh, we in real trouble now." What you mean? Did you hear that? Did you hear what they said? They sent the CIA everywhere. They coming for you. I said, "Oh, I ain't worried about that. I ain't thinking about them." I said they had all the sophisticated machines they had in Vietnam. And when the Vietnamese overran them, they were running for their helicopters. When you face an enemy, you must demystify the enemy. Third point. Did you know the FBI was tapping Dr. King's phone? I knew they were tapping mine. That's understood. I've never hidden my hatred for them, nor my contempt, nor my desire to destroy them. As a matter of fact, the older I am, the more determined I become to destroy these pigs. Consequently, that they should try to destroy me is only automatic. Indeed, the great son of Africa, Stokely Ture, says, "If the enemy is not doing anything against you, you are not doing anything." Not too long ago, I was speaking to a young brother. He said, "Hey man, ain't you afraid they're going to kill you? What makes you think they're not going to get you before they get me?" As a matter of fact, the chances of them getting you before they get me is more because I'm alert. I know they're trying to get me. The FBI knows that I came out of the same conditions that you live in. The FBI know I am no different than you. So the FBI not afraid of me because of who I am. They're afraid of me because of who you are. Me by myself, I can't do anything. But us together, we could burn 256 cities in a weekend. So people think that the FBI only taps the phones of people who are working for the people. You're making a big mistake. I'll tell you from my travels throughout the world and from my research throughout the world that the American people are more followed by their government authorities than any people in the world. Just your credit card company knows more about you than the government agencies know about its people in other countries. The American people are totally followed. Fourth point. As a young man, I could say that I cut my teeth organizing in Greenland, Mississippi, a Delta town, and as racist as you can get, full of Ku Klux Klan, White Citizens Council, FBI, police, all of them just shooting us for fun. I was told by my SNCC superiors that whenever there was an incident, you should go to the FBI and make them come and make reports. I would go into City Hall in Greenwood to get the FBI. I would find them in the office of the police chief, just chewing tobacco and swapping jokes about us. This FBI agent would now be forced to leave there and come with us to go make a report. Of course, I never trusted the FBI. I just thought that they would do their job. In the early days, the FBI made it clear to us. I'll give you one clear example, historical. In the southern part of the state of Mississippi, there was an African man by the name of Herbert Lee, strong man, determined man, a man full of consciousness, who recognized that rather than to be a slave, he would fight to be free. And Mr. Lee had contacted us and told us to come. He wanted to do some work in the South with the movement there. One of our snake superiors, on error, contacted the FBI and told him that Mr. Herbert Lee wanted to do some work with us. And the FBI gave his name to the local police chief, and Mr. Lee was assassinated within 48 hours. After that, nobody in SNCC looked at the FBI for anything except a chance to shoot those pigs down. Fifth point. I thought that with this topic we could begin to show and demonstrate how, in fact, as a political activist, of course this history could be shed for most political activists. How, in fact, I came to, unlike most people in America, begin to see the police apparatus in this country for what it is. Of course, like most people in the United States of America, in my early life, I thought the FBI were these good guys, running around helping everybody. I thought they supported peace and all this nonsense. As a young man at Howard University, I went to work in the South with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in Mississippi. And here I thought the legal basis for this work was clear. In fact, all we were trying to do as young students was to get our people the right to vote. While I certainly was aware of the racist and the terroristic nature of the United States of America in relation to Africans, I certainly had not understood the role of the FBI as an organized force of terrorism against my people. On struggle. All that is stopping us from undertaking this task is will and determination. The task is not an easy task, but we're revolutionaries. We don't look for easy struggle. I mean, who looks for easy struggle? Somebody who don't want to struggle. Somebody who don't want to struggle, look for easy struggle. You want to struggle? Give me the most difficult. That's what we did in SNCC. Y'all want to struggle here? Well, take Mississippi. That's the worst one. We want to struggle. That's where we're going. We want the most difficult struggle. On the struggle being eternal. The struggle is an eternal struggle. The capitalist system will confuse you. Someone said, our people are just now people. They want everything now. They are now people. If you tell them something for later, I ain't got no time for later. I want it now. Capitalism makes you think that everything must come now. But the struggle that you're involved in is a struggle in which you will not reap that which you have sown. You have already reaped that which has been sown by past generations. You must sow for the future generations to reap. I'm so tired of brothers and sisters coming in saying, when am I going to live the good life? It ain't for you. It's for the next generation. Do your work now for the next generation. When you work for your people, it's not what you receive, it's what you give. And the best thing about working for the people is what you really get for the people. Sometimes nobody else knows except you. This is real struggle for the people. Thus, we must wipe out from our minds that the struggle in which we're involved in is going to give us any victories. The struggle in which we're involved in is an eternal struggle. We're not working for ourselves, we're working for generations to come. Therefore, what I've done, you ain't even begin to see. Generations later will come to thank us for the work we've done. Alright, give me a moment to clear up my throat. Alright. On drugs. Oh, that's incorrect. Oh, so next, Kwame Ture debates at a Zionist debate. Man says, in one of your answers, you openly supported these gangs with Uzi machine guns, and these are your army. These are the gangs that are pushing drugs into our community. I want to ask you, how can I not consider you a drug dealer? Kwame Ture, I'm sorry, my young comrade. Do you really mean to tell me that you think that these young people with submachine guns in Los Angeles are the ones who really control drugs in this country? Man, who's doing it? The army can't. Ture. I'll tell you who's doing it. The CIA and the FBI are bringing drugs into this country. I'll tell you better than that. That Georgie Boychie terrorist, George Bush, he's the one bringing drugs into the community. Man, how do you know that? George Bush isn't pushing drugs. George Bush doesn't support these gangs. George Bush is leading these gangs that are pushing drugs. Ture, I'm sorry, you didn't understand my statement. My statement was, the man interrupts. Ture says, no, you didn't. Let me explain it to you. The Chinese Revolution built its Red Army by transforming bandit groups into the Red Army. You know this for a fact? Well, you can read it. Now, these groups, who are gangs with Uzi machine guns, this is my army, which must be transformed to my army. They have guns now, and they are being used by the enemy against my own people. I said that. You know anything about the Contras and Watergate and Bush and the vice president, but he didn't know nothing about it? You think I'm a fool? You think I'm a fool? Reagan has a deal with selling drugs through the CIA, and Bush, who's the CIA, is the vice president, and they know nothing about it, supposedly? You must go for that opa-dopey stuff. Bush is the one who's bringing drugs in. I said it and I'll say it again. And when you find out, years later, you'll say, oh, he was right again. On Colin Powell and black people wanting to join the army. Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael. On Colin Powell, 1995 interview. Interviewer, Colin Powell has said, the military is an excellent way for a black person to advance. Kwame Ture, I cannot see how anyone can tell me that the best way for one to advance is by being a hired killer. You mean to tell me that the only way we can advance is by being killers and being killers of the enemies of American imperialism? Because who do we kill? We don't kill our enemies. Do we go to Asnia, South Africa, and kill the clerk? Do we kill the KKK? Do we kill the racist policeman? No, we go and we kill Arabs who ain't done nothing against us. We don't even know them. They've never done anything against us. So it is clear here that Mr. Powell is a liar, Mr. Powell is a traitor to his people, and Mr. Powell is a traitor to humanity. And Mr. Powell accepts that position. That position was made again, and don't you ever forget it, because Dr. Martin Luther King made that position available. If you love King, you can never love Powell. Interviewer, if you were in a position to advise someone who had attained the position of general in the U.S. Army, and was offered the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, what would you have said? Ture, blow it up. Interviewer, ha ha ha, the Pentagon? Ture, blow it up. On Abraham Lincoln in the Civil War, Ture says, the Civil War started in 1861. Abraham Lincoln did not sign the Emancipation Proclamation until 1863, 2 years after the war began, because the North was losing the war. That's the only reason why. If the war was fought over the question of slavery in 1861, when the first bullet was fired, every slave would have been free. But he had no intention of freeing the slaves. And this is true. I know they will tell you he's the great white father. I understand, because apparently we can't do anything ourselves. Everything's done for us by the great white father. They don't stop anywhere, these people. So when he freed the slaves in 1863, dig this, he didn't let them pick up guns. Frederick Douglass wore his feet out at the White House, begging Lincoln to let the slaves pick up the gun, but Lincoln refused. He didn't let the slaves pick up the gun until 1864, and when we picked up the gun, this war was ended in 9 months. If you don't think the slaves did it, you must be crazy. But I know the people. You give me a gun to get Mr. Charles, who's been whooping my mother before me, give me that gun, Jack. But that's true. Lincoln did not have... Lincoln's interest was in saving the Union, not freeing the slaves. So he is not the... See, American history books, it's like nothing in it is really true when it comes to slavery. Nothing in it is really true. And I'm not telling you that myself. It's what people like Kwame Ture or Malcolm X or Amos Wilson told me, or Asada Shakur. I'm not the one saying this. On the Vietnam War... Interviewer, why didn't you think you should go to war in Vietnam? Ture, there was absolutely no reason for me to go, especially me. From the time I was 19 years old, I was tortured, I was in prison, I was beaten in the South just for trying to give the right to vote to Africans there. So there was no way in the world that I, who am beaten in Mississippi for trying to get the right to vote, is going to go to Vietnam and give somebody else the right to vote with a gun by those who are denying me the right to vote. I mean, logic, it just wasn't possible. There was no way. It was clear. If I can't vote in Mississippi, how am I going to go in Vietnam and fight? Give me a gun in Mississippi. Get my vote here. Then we'll see about Vietnam. Interviewer, what happened? Were you drafted at any time? Ture, yeah, I refused to go. Interviewer, did you go to jail? Ture, no. They said I was crazy in one way or another. I forgot the classification it was, but they gave me a crazy classification. They said I was crazy. Well, there's a pleasure, sure, in being mad, which none but the madman knows. So we're approaching the end now of this long lecture on the politics of Kwame Ture. So it's almost over. On religion, Ture. Our people have never seen religion as the opium of the masses. Religion and revolution go hand in hand. If one is truly religious, one must be evolutionary. And I want this plastered in the walls of every single church all over the country, because this is an extremely true statement. Religion is more than just praying. It's more than just praying. It's about charity. It's about act. Same as theory and practice. If you're religious, you must practice your theory. If you don't do it, you're not religious. You're not religious. On Hollywood, you must understand, if you're a filmmaker, none of your films, if they're serious, will be put on television. That's the first thing I think. That's the first thing. I think Spike Lee is just a filmmaker who makes money. That's all. And he fought Malcolm X. But that was expected. Anyhow, he tries. But if you want to give a message to the people, then you have to be serious. You have to do some serious study. Understand some things. It's not spontaneous. If you want your films to get on Hollywood, you can't give a line for the people. That's clear. You can't help your people and make money too. Not in films. So if you're a real filmmaker, at this point in history, your films will not be popular. They will not be on mass television, but the conscious element of your people will appreciate it. You will give inspiration to them and push others forward. But if you're looking for popularity in this country, you will never get it by being honest or righteous or supporting just causes. The point he's making is pretty clear, and it's obvious. You cannot make an honest movie about revolutionary struggle on Hollywood. I don't even think Spike Lee even had much control over the film, if I remember correctly, when he did Malcolm X. But that's a video for a different day. As well as the autobiography. On when the president at the time called for a new world order. Was it Reagan or it might have been Bush? I remember they went on TV, national television, and they were telling the America that they're working towards a new world order. So the interviewer asked Ture, what is your interpretation of the new world order? Ture says, the new world order is nothing but SOS, same old, same old. It's just imperialism, since the anti-colonial struggle has been forced to grant concessions, even neo-colonialism, if you will. And finding itself now in its final crisis is trying to revert to this, to come back to the old order, calling it the new order. But once the people's conscience has been risen, they cannot be pushed back. Consequently, all this new order is going to lead to the final conflict between imperialism and the struggling masses around the world. So, America, when it began, was a brutal country that used slavery and genocide to do what it had to do. Now, our great-great-grandfathers and grandmothers, they fought for us, and they gave us a better life. And this country wants to go back to that. So what Ture is saying is that there is no new world order. They want to go back to the old order. They want to get rid of all the progress we made and put us back in chains, legally, like the old days. On imperialism. Imperialism is a system where a country goes to abuse and exploit another country by taking out the resources of that country, making those resources come back home to the motherland of the exploiting country. Then that country there will now manufacture the goods and sell back the same goods to the original country at a higher price. Let me give you an example. When the great son of Africa, Kwame Nkrumah, was president of Ghana, cocoa was the base. The British used to take the cocoa out at a very low price, make chocolate in Britain, or the British would take it to their land, make the chocolate, and then sell the chocolate at high prices all over the world, and even sell it back in Ghana at higher prices, where they first got it from. And there was nothing that they could do about it. So this is what imperialism is. It takes the resources out and robs them. It exploits the exploited, and then labor of the people, getting them out, and then high prices. Of course, the best example is Azania, South Africa, with our diamonds. It's our diamonds. We go into the ground, we die to pull those diamonds out. And when we pull them out, they go through Israel and they are sold on 42nd Street, on Brussels, everywhere else, and we get absolutely nothing. It's our diamonds. Imperialism will be destroyed. On capitalism and socialism, the capitalist system doesn't lie some of the time. It lies all of the time. And for the last year, it has been trumpeting a little tune about socialism's fallen, socialism's collapse. This is nonsense. You never judge a system by its adherents. You do not judge Christianity by Christians. You judge no system by its believers. You judge it by its principles. If we were to judge Christianity by Christians, it should have been smashed millions of years ago, even before it came to earth. As a matter of fact, if you were to judge Christianity by Christians, then Christianity fell with Judas. But you don't judge Christianity by Christians, and you don't judge socialism by socialists. You judge Christianity by its principles, irrespective of Christians. You judge socialism by its principles, irrespective of those who call themselves socialists. Where is the confusion? You think socialism has fallen? Don't go nowhere. It's coming right back here to America because it's the only just economic system. There are only two economic systems in the world, capitalism and socialism. There can only be two because there's only one fundamental difference between them. Who owns the wealth of the country? Under a capitalist system, a few people own. Under a socialist people, all own. That's all. On poverty, this country assumes that if someone is poor, they are poor because of their own individual plight, or because they weren't born on the right side of town, or they had too many children, or went in the army too early, or because their father was a drunk, or they didn't care about school. They made a mistake. That's a lot of nonsense. Poverty is well calculated in this country, and the reason why the poverty program won't work is because the calculators of poverty are administering it. Second point. As for white America, perhaps it can stop crying out against black supremacy, black nationalism, racism in reverse, and begin facing reality. The reality is that this nation from top to bottom is racist. On capitalism, if this was 1853 and we were a couple of blocks away from Virginia, all of us would have to pick cotton. This is just a fact, whether you wanted to or not. When the enemy forces you to do something, you are forced to do it. The difference is whether you accept it or not. You give your labor to the master, but you give your soul to the people. We live in a capitalist system. Until we smash it, we are slaves of the wage. The question is whether or not you sell your labor and your soul to the capitalist pigs, or while selling your labor, you resist as much as possible. You must not sell your soul to capitalism. While we're in the system, we are not part of it. We are forced to be in it because of power. We must understand that while inside it, we must resist it. We're on line 400. Give me a chance to take another drink. Alright. We're on the last few lines, by the way. On capitalism and racism. I think the problem is that many people in America think that racism is an attitude, and this is encouraged by the capitalist system. So they think that what people think is what makes them racist. Racism is not an attitude. If a white man wants to lynch me, that's his problem. If he's got the power to lynch me, that's my problem. Racism is not a question of attitude, it is a question of power. Racism gets its power from capitalism. Thus, if you're anti-racist, whether you know it or not, you must be anti-capitalist. The power of racism, the power for sexism, comes from capitalism, not an attitude. You cannot be a racist without power. You cannot be a sexist without power. Even men who beat their wives get this power from the society which allows it, condones it, encourages it. One cannot be against racism, one cannot be against sexism, unless one is against capitalism. On racism. Interviewer. What happened to racism in America? This was asked of him in the 90s, by the way, for the context. Ture says, it's still strong. It's very strong. It's become more subtle. But its subtleties, of course, are being exposed more and more by none other than the bourgeoisie themselves, who they call it have reached the ceiling. It's become more vicious, there's no question about it, about its subtleties, and the people are more determined to fight it in every aspect. On consciousness. You cannot win freedom on instincts. You can only win freedom on reason. Therefore, the unconscious are those who react on instinct. The conscious are those who react on reason. The job of the conscious is to make the unconscious conscious. Let us make an example. In 92, the African population in Los Angeles revolted. This was instinctively revolutionary. Instinctively in the sense that it wasn't planned. Instinctive in the sense that it was a reaction to brutality. And this instinctive revolutionary act was very costly to American capitalism. They even had to bring in the American army. But since it was an instinct, it had no reason, nothing to direct it. It would spin itself out. Those who participated were largely unconscious. Would you imagine what would it have been like when we consciously organized to rebel in Los Angeles with reason? Nothing big, just a little planning. Our task is not to teach the unconscious to be conscious, but to make them conscious of their unconscious behavior. Because unconsciously, instinctively, they seek freedom. What we must do is make them conscious. Look, you want freedom anyways. Let's be serious. Let's sit down, let's plan it, and let's tear down the system and walk towards liberation. It's as simple as that. We must make clear distinctions between mobilizers and organizers. Mobilization is very easy. It mobilizes people around issues. We're concerned with the system. The difference must be properly understood. Mobilization usually leads to reform action, not revolutionary action. Mobilization is temporary. Organization is permanent and eternal. We must transform mobilization into organization. If we're not careful, we allow mobilization to become events. The struggle is never an event. It's a process, a continual, eternal process. Power comes only from the organized masses. So now for the last part, I just have etc. quotes that we need to fit into a category. And after this, we'll be finished with the lecture. So, etc. quotes. We are not tired. We will never get tired. Anytime we think about getting tired, we think about our grandparents who worked from can't see morning to can't see night and kept going. And we get all the energy we need. Second quote. Justice is not a quantitative question. If you steal something for long enough, it doesn't become yours. Third quote. When you face an enemy, you must demystify the enemy. The enemy is a man just like you. The enemy is a woman just like you. And when they make errors, you must take all advantage of them. Demystify the enemy. Next quote. If you want somebody to follow something that you are telling them, which is a good advice, the best way to make them follow it is to be the best example of the advice you're giving them. Next quote. If your people are being exploited and you refuse to lift a finger to help your people, you're against your people, and you're actively joining the side of the enemy. If any of you sitting here who are African have never done anything for your people, you've been against your people. Let that be properly understood. Clearly, the contradiction logical statement is correct. Only we will free us. And if we don't work to free us, who will work to free us? The enemy? Next quote. The Chinese say, be warned by the speaker. Be not warned by the speaker, but the words that he speaketh. I recall an incident when standing on a block in Ohio, just discussing that you can learn something from everybody. While discussing this with a man, a drunken man was coming down the street, and there were sirens going all around. So he said, you say you can learn something from every man? Look at this man. He's the biggest drunk in our community. He never has anything worthwhile to say. The drunk man came right up to him and said, your house is on fire. So that explains the sirens in the beginning of the story. The next quote. The Chinese say, be not warned by the speaker, but the words that he speaketh. Oh, did I put that twice? Oh, I did. Oh, anyways. Next quote. If you African American, what you gonna do when they bomb Libya? America bombed Libya. Libya is in Africa. Which part of you is dominant, American or African? The part that bombed or the part that got bombed? Next quote. The rougher the water, the stronger the swimmer. The harder the battle, the stronger the warrior. Next quote. One of the tricks of American capitalism in giving education is that it gives you only a one-sided view of reality. And as we conclude this lecture of the politics of Kwame Ture, I repeat the first quote that I said, and think about it. Think about everything. So I'll repeat once more. If your people are oppressed and you are not making a contribution to end the sufferings of your people, by your very act of inaction, you are against your people. There is no middle ground.